The Q101 Morning Crew.
On Q101.
Brian and Kenzie on Q101. It is time for Kenzie's Krimes, where she brings Case and I into a crime around Chicago or Illinois. We don't know exactly anything about it because Kenzie doesn't tell me or Case anything about it. And we love to be surprised on these things. So, Kenzie, take it away.
Okay, and I love to ask you guys, have you ever heard of Jeanine Nicarico?
Jeanine Nicarico, I have not.
I know a few Jeanines, but not a Nicarico.
Okay, well, Jeanine Nicarico is all about to change. You're going to learn a lot about her. She was a sweet 10-year-old girl who lived in Naperville, Illinois, obviously very close, with her whole family. She was a 5th grader and attended Naperville's Elmwood Elementary School. She had brown eyes, dimples, and loved horses, which is totally the phase I went through when I was in 5th grade, too. So I feel like in tune with her. And we're coming up on this anniversary, okay? On February 25th, 1983, Jeanine stayed home from school sick with the flu. Her father was an engineer in Chicago, and her mother was a local school secretary. So they left her home alone with some very specific instructions. Don't let anybody in.
Very fair.
Right?
Yeah.
So remember when your parents used to be like, don't open that door, okay? My parents used to leave me home alone all the time.
Yeah, me too. You know what? Me
Right?
too, actually. Like,
Right?
I was like they used to call it a latchkey kid. They used to call it back in the day.
We always got left home. I don't know. There was, like,
Yeah.
Keep it locked.
Kenzie, how old were you when you started being left home alone?
I mean, I was taking the bus in elementary school. So I was probably getting home in 3rd and 4th grade, and my parents weren't home yet. So I'd walk from the bus stop to the house, have to get in the house, and then I'd be home alone for a few hours.
So like your son's age now.
I mean, he's like older than that. I
Yeah.
wouldn't. I mean, I barely let him upstairs alone. I'm like, oh, don't trust that.
He's got like the president's escort from the school to get home up there in Elgin.
I know. I'm like, oh, it would be like a whole thing. He's still like, where are my socks? Like, it wouldn't work. I'm like,
A whole thing. Where are my socks?
I'm like, you've been in this room for so long. But, okay. So anyways, those were her mother's instructions. Now, her mother, because she was a local school secretary, she came home for lunch and found her sweet daughter, like, still in her pajamas, when you're sick and you're lounging all day. The mother made her lunch, and her daughter, Jeanine, told her that she actually had let a man in from the gas company into the house.
Oh, man.
So Jeanine's mother, like, gently scolded her. Everything was obviously okay. The guy had already come and gone. She's like, you do not do that, okay? Like, I am super close. She goes, don't let anybody in. Keep the door locked. And even if the doorbell rings, let me know because I can come right home, okay? Like, just call me. So she gave her a really tight hug. She wanted her daughter to feel better, put her back in the bed, and went to work. Now, coming back home from work again, Mrs. Nicarico walked up to her home to find the front door ajar.
Oh, boy.
Clearly a forced entry with a large, muddy footprint stamped in the middle of the door.
Oh,
As if it had
the
been
door.
kicked in.
Ugh.
She headed into the house to find that her daughter, Jeanine, was missing along with all of her bed sheets. Good
Lord.
Could you imagine walking up to the door and just seeing a huge footprint in the middle of it, like a big man's boot?
That is like, that's everybody's nightmare, without question.
Everyone's nightmare. And this is of course, like, you don't have the Ring doorbell. Like, you can't even, you're just like, oh my God. So a mere 2 days later, did not take long at all. Jeanine's body was found in a wooded area besides a local nature trail. She had been assaulted and died from blows to the head.
No.
So Naperville is in a panic. I mean, obviously, like Brian and I just said, like, it was very normal. Like, my parents would come home if I was home from school because I was sick and check on me at lunch and all that. This is just your normal day. Door was locked. You checked on her in the middle of the day, called the house, all these things. So Naperville was in a panic. This is a senseless crime towards someone so young, right? Her 5th grade class they were so distraught. They actually, they named a star after her and they were trying to do all these sweet things. There was large gatherings that were held at a local church and a $10,000 reward had been set. Yet leads were far and few between. A lot of times when we do these cases, we talk about the cops being overwhelmed with leads. I think I saw this. There was just nothing. This happened in a quiet neighborhood in the middle of a work day. There was nothing coming in for them. So the officer on the case Now, this is going to sound weird. His name was John Sam, so he's Officer Sam. I'm not just calling him casually Sam the whole time.
Part of the all name squad for Kenzie's
I'm like,
Crimes.
Sam.
Put him in the rafters.
Put him in there. The names in these stories are always unbelievable.
I know. It's not my fault. I don't pick them. Okay. So Sam finally received a tip that a young man in Aurora, Alex Hernandez, knew about the murder. Now, upon finding him, Hernandez began to talk. So according to Sam, the officer, Hernandez said that all he knew about the Nicarico case was that one night recently he had been sitting in a car with Stephen Buckley, a guy named Ricky, and another friend. And that Ricky had started talking about murdering the little girl.
Jeez.
Beyond that, Hernandez says he didn't know anything. So he was saying it was just this guy's story. Okay?
Okay.
Now, they tracked down Buckley, all right? They went and found him, and he had a pair of boots that may be a match to the ones found on the front door. And actually, Buckley cooperated. He was young. All these guys were, like, with their parents and stuff still. So Buckley totally cooperated. They stopped by the house. The parents, like, gladly gave him the boots in a paper bag. It was like, yeah, run the check on these. Like, weirdly, like, easy, right? So they took them to the lab's chief identification expert, God be with me, John Goraszewski's, and Gorajczyk. I got nothing.
Okay.
Was he a hockey player?
They took him to John, okay? And at first he declared that Buckley's boots were not a match. However, to this day, John has testified that they might not be, and he does not recall that original opinion. So, kind of interesting, like, how do you, like, I don't know how that wasn't recorded properly, like, opinions on, like, matches, but whatever. So, Officer Sam was less concerned with the boot and more concerned with getting confessions out of Hernandez and Buckley. He really believed that, like, maybe all these guys were kind of in on it, and they were like, oh, he just said something, but, like, the group of guys had showed up to the house because there were also boot prints in the front yard. So they felt like maybe more than one person had walked up, right? So he was less concerned about that. He wanted someone to admit to the crime. He wanted to get those confessions. So at one point, Sam and the other detectives recruited. This is an interesting way to do this. So at one point, Sam and other detectives recruited a Hispanic prisoner named Penguin. I know. They put Hernandez and Penguin in a room with a box of money.
Okay.
Supposedly the $10,000 reward. They also wired the place for with like tape recorders and everything. So they instructed Penguin to tell Hernandez that he knew all the details about the child murder and that had occurred with the family, and that Penguin was going to cooperate with the police. So Penguin was like recruited basically to persuade Hernandez to help him cooperate,
right.
And then they could both be heroes and they could both get the money. Like they could like be in cahoots together, okay? And this was supposed to be like another criminal, so it's not like a judgy thing. Like, hey, we're both criminals, like whatever. Okay. Unfortunately, and I didn't see this coming, it turned into a boasting contest. So Sam was listening to the conversation, the officer, and he became convinced that Hernandez was making up stories to impress Penguin.
Oh, no.
To earn his share of the cash. So he was lying because he wanted to earn the money, and he also wanted to impress a criminal that I guess he thought was like better than him. So Hernandez made a number of incriminating statements, including that he held Jeanine down, that he tied her up, like all these crazy things. And the officer was like, I don't, like when he's describing this doesn't even match the crime scene. This doesn't match up with the stories. I don't think he's telling the truth.
Right.
So a quote from Sam, the officer, was, "We would ride around endlessly going into people's homes asking if we can look around." Because he'd say, oh, I think it's the farmhouse over there. I think it's the house over there. Or no, wait, the crime happened over here. And he goes, I'm done. That's enough, because they didn't tell him what house it happened in. They were waiting for him to correctly be able to identify on his own. So they were testing him, and he was just picking out random houses. Like he couldn't even identify where it happened. So despite Sam's belief that Hernandez and Buckley and their friend Cruz were innocent, but despite all of that, where he's like, none of this matches up, nothing links them to the case, just rumors that they had known about it, right?
Okay.
Indictments were made on all three of them. Now, this is allegedly because there was a political campaign going on. The city was getting restless with this crime, and allegedly someone put the indictments down to make it look like they'd done a good job to get more votes. Okay?
Okay.
There's people who disagree with that, but it was happening during a voting period.
Very
okay?
Illinois. Very Illinois.
So I cannot confirm or deny. It's just the rumor on the street.
Okay. Got it.
So the trial was set for 1985 for the indictments of all three. This is 2 years after the initial crime. Sam was so upset, the officer, about this because he believed the true criminal was still out there, right?
Mm-hmm.
He feels like you guys are going to pursue three men, total lack of evidence, and he and his court didn't believe it was them. And I have to tell you, he made the wildest decision as a police officer. I have never heard of this before, to basically stand up to this decision. And that's where I'm going to take a break.
Oh, no.
Because I can't, but I was shocked when I was reading this. I read it like 3 times.
Holy crap. All right. We'll stay right here. You've got the stages set for what happened. And when we come back, the conclusion of what happened in Kenzie's Crimes here with Brian and Kenzie on Q101.
The Q101 Morning Crew.
On Q101.
The Q101 Morning Crew.
On Q101.
Brian and Kenzie on Q101 with the conclusion of Kenzie's Crime. She laid out an incredible thing that happened out in Naperville back in the 80s. And I'll let Kenzie just take it from here to give you a quick recap and then get to the conclusion of what happened.
Yes, Jeanine Nicarico was a 10-year-old girl who lived in Naperville. She stayed home sick with the flu one morning, and basically when her mom came home from work, she found the door ajar and a huge muddy footprint, like it had been kicked in right in the middle of their door. Jeanine's body was then found 2 days later in kind of like a nature trail area, and they had basically no leads except rumors that a few of these guys knew about the crime. So they decided to put indictments down on these guys because 2 years later they didn't really have leads. Now, the main officer on the case did not agree with this. He didn't think these guys were guilty. He often said that he thought they were stupid, but he didn't think they were guilty. And he was so upset that nobody was truly looking for the criminal. It's like, we just want to charge them so we don't get criticized and people think the case is solved, right? He really felt that in his soul, and he made the boldest decision. I was in shock. The Officer Sam, quit his job and decided to testify in court for the defendants.
What?
He testified on their behalf in court, the officer who was previously running the case.
Because he believed that much that they were innocent.
Yes, and it pissed him off that much. So the men he previously interrogated and set up all these things for, he was so frustrated no one was listening to him, and he wanted to find the true criminal. His quote was, "The whole deal was somebody has got to say something about this trial in court. Aren't we going to look for the real guys? That's what's really bothering me." He goes, "I don't give a blank about these blank in jail, but they didn't do it, and we aren't looking for the real guy." Okay, so he was super upset. Now, this gets so petty. His previous employers claim that Officer Sam just had a big ego, and he didn't like that they wanted him to monitor a convenience store, and he was doing this out of spite.
That's just Sam. He's like a big blowhard.
They're
He's
like,
always talking about stuff.
I know. I'm like,
you know about this guy.
It's just John Sam being John Sam.
It was just like, I was like, what is going on here? The pettiness, like, you need to be focused on like what you should be, like the important thing is this girl and her family, and there's all this pettiness going on. So despite his efforts, Sam, in court, it was an enormously emotional court case. You have the family there. You have images of this poor 10-year-old girl's body who was found. You have 3 men sitting there who had previously made comments that they were part of it, even though it was probably just to get attention. It was a tough one, okay? So they even said that some of the jurors left physically ill from the room and had to be escorted out. Now, Hernandez and Cruz were found guilty and sentenced to the death penalty.
Jeez.
Well, Buckley ended up in a hung jury, and prosecutors promised they'd be coming back for him. Now, I don't want to be this person, but it is odd that the two Hispanics got charged and the white person ended in a hung jury when they all had a pretty equal amount
Share.
of evidence / lack thereof.
Yeah.
So it does seem to kind of skew this way. I wasn't in the courtroom to know why that is, but it's very interesting because there wasn't a lot of evidence. So
It's something to note. It's something to note.
I would like to note it because I could see people pointing it out.
It sounds like there's almost no evidence of all three. It's just all it's just talking.
It's really essentially word of mouth.
Yeah, that's
and a similar but not exact boot. It's kind of crazy.
Is Timberlands? Yeah,
Yeah, right.
Those? Tim's?
Yeah. So now they promised to be coming back for him. Then, just 3 months after the trial was concluded, a 7-year-old girl was abducted, assaulted, and murdered in LaSalle County, less than 50 miles west of DuPage, which is where Naperville is, okay?
Yeah.
A 29-year-old man named Brian Dugan was arrested and charged with that crime. Dugan confessed to his attorney that he had killed 3 people total: Melissa, a nurse named Donna, and Jeanine, the young girl.
No way.
An investigator gave his attorney several questions to ask Dugan. He asked him about the car that he was driving the time that Jeanine was murdered. He said that he was driving a green, I'm bad at cars. Velour?
Valari was an old car. I
Is
remember
that okay? So
Yeah.
I've never heard of that car. So that's what he was driving. He claimed that on that day he murdered her, he did not go to work, and his employer confirmed his absence from work. And he said he claimed that he prowled through neighborhoods, smoking marijuana, and sometime in the early afternoon, Dugan knocked on Jeanine's front door. He tried to talk to Jeanine, but she wouldn't open it for strangers, she said. And a few seconds later, he kicked it open and abducted her.
God.
His confession completely matched the evidence. He remembered tying her up even in her sheets and had recounted that information. And then wiped the fingerprints off the doorknob using that sheet. He also claimed to wearing boots that would match the print on the door. The boots that he claimed he wore were an exact match.
Yeah.
All that evidence. He was not charged with Jeanine's murder.
What?
With a confession. They didn't charge him. January 1988, the Supreme Court ruled that Cruz and Hernandez should not have been tried together, and they were ordered to 2 different separate trials for them. So here's a confession with all the matching details, and we're still focusing on Cruz and Hernandez and actually taking them to court once again.
What the hell?
2 years later, January 11th, 1990, Cruz went on trial for the second time. The defense intended to prove that Dugan was the killer. However, the prosecution claimed that if Dugan was the killer, that Cruz and Hernandez were his accomplices. In what world? Like, they weren't even friends. This is insane.
Because the white guy couldn't do it alone. No.
This is what I'm saying. This is so crazy. February 1st, 1990, Cruz was again found guilty of murder and sentenced to death.
Jesus.
Despite a confession with matching evidence. Hernandez's second trial ended in a hung jury. At his third trial, he had to go again. At his third trial, he was again found guilty of murder and kidnapping and was sentenced to 80 years in prison.
Ugh.
Then, 1994, they overturned Cruz's conviction once again. New DNA testing excluded him and Hernandez. Okay, finally, DNA testing had developed. They realized these guys were not on the crime scene. So in November 1995, a judge acquitted them for a Jeanine's murder. And in December, Hernandez's conviction was officially overturned and he was released. In 2002, think about how this happened in 1983. In 2002, Cruz was pardoned by the Illinois governor, and the new DNA tests identified that Dugan was at the crime scene. It linked him to the crime scene. However, it still was not until 2005 that he was charged with Jeanine's murder. He was convicted and sentenced to death on November 10th, 2009. However, the death penalty then got ruled to be ended in 2011, and he was then resentenced to life in prison.
Yeah, I definitely remember that when that happened in Illinois because of kind of what you're talking about. if those poor kids, the other guys who didn't do it, were killed, and they found a bunch of other people in Illinois, there was probably some wrong executions, so they abolished the death penalty in Illinois. But it's
Is that not a confession matching evidence with somebody who also had already clearly done a similar crime, and it was not accepted, and they went on to continue to try to blame two other people who really there weren't. I'm not saying these were, great guys, the other guys by any means, but it was just crazy. Think about the amount of court cases, and think about this poor family, which her family's still around, okay? And this poor family, the amount of cases they were drug through, right? Because they attended these. They wanted peace. They wanted to know what happened to their daughter on that day. And they had to sit through all of this. And that family actually still is based in Naperville. And they do a lot of really cool fundraising stuff for kids in the community, like a lot of literacy, like runs and walks and all this. So they're an amazing family. And I'm so happy that they finally received their true answer and they got stopped, things they weren't getting pulled through anymore. But the journey that they had to go on is unbelievable. And those guys, and it's just, I couldn't believe the drama and the convictions, The
guy who did it could have died of old age by the time they got him. I don't know how old he is, but geez, like 24 years? Something like that, close to it.
Could you imagine admitting it and literally turning in, the boots that match? They just wouldn't convict him. He's probably like, okay. It's just unbelievable.
God,
I tried.
That is terrible. Hey.
I don't know.
It's me. Good Lord. That is terrifying. Never heard that case. Never heard her name, sadly. What a tragic story. I'm glad justice finally got done. It just took way too long.
It took way too long. That family deserves so much better. And honestly, if you're in that area and you see one of the runs that they're hosting, because they do so much to raise funds for literacy and things like that, because that's what Jeanine loved, and they do that in honor of her name. So, go participate and, bring that joy to Jeanine's name if you can. They're still in that Naperville area.
Wow. Kenzie, thank you for delivering that story today. I mean, tragic and disturbing, but also wild.
Riveting.
Yeah, that's crazy. Kenzie Krimes. If you missed any part of it, remember, you'll find it there on the new Brian and Kenzie podcast as its own segment. Kenzie Krimes on there. If you missed any part of it, go back and you can dissect it there and enjoy it. It's Brian and Kenzie on Q101.
The Q101 Morning Crew.
On Q101.